surface of the organ, a remnant of the lobular construction of the gland. The kidney is dense in texture, but it is easily lacerable by mechanical force. In order to obtain knowledge of a structure of the gland, a vertical section must be made from its cortex to its concave border, and the loose tissue and fat removed from around the vessels and the excretory duct, which is the ureter. So they've made an incision here in figure 536, and it says vertical section of the kidney. Okay. It will then be seen that the kidney contains or consists of a central cavity surrounded by all its parts but one, by the proper prolongation of the fibrous coat of the kidney, which extends through a longitudinal fissure, the hilum, which is situated at the part of the cavity which is not surrounded by a kidney structure. Through this fissure, the blood vessels of the kidney and its excretory duct passes, and therefore these structures, upon entering the kidney, are contained within the sinus. The excretory duct, or ureter, after entering, dilates into a wide funnel-shaped sac named the pelvis. This divides 2 or 3 tubular divisions, which divide into several short, truncated branches named the calyces, or infundibular, not too sure, of all which are contained in the central cavity of the kidney. The blood vessels of the kidney, after passing through the hilum, are contained in the sinus or central cavity, lying between its lining membrane and the excretory apparatus before entering the kidney. Substance. This central cavity, as mentioned, is surrounded on all sides, except at the hilum, by the substance of the kidney, which is once seen to consist of 2 parts, via of an external granular investing part, which is called the cortical portion, and of an internal part, the medullary portion, made up of a number of dark-colored pyramid masses, with their bases resting on the central parts, and their apices converging towards the center, where they form prominent papillae, which project into the interior of the calyces. The cortical substance is of a bright reddish brown color, soft, granular, and easily lacerable. I think we've understood that damage to the kidney is very easy. It is found everywhere immediately beneath the capsule and extends into an arch to form over the base of the medullary pyramid. So here we can see that's the cortex, and these pyramid shapes are called the medulla. So urine is formed at these cortex and drains into the medulla, then drains into the papilla, then drains into your minor calyces, then your major calyces, then your pelvis, then it goes down to your urinary bladder for urine to be excreted. Here we can see a uriniferous tubule, aka the nephron. I think this is such an old textbook, and it's really cool to see how the old designs were. And yeah, it's really interesting. The part separating the sides of any 2 pyramids through which the arteries and nerves enter and the veins, lymphatics emerge from the kidney is called a cortical column, or column spertini. Okay, I've definitely dodged that. While that portion, which stretches from one cortical column to the next and intervenes between the base of the pyramid papilla mammalia of the kidney projects into one of the calyces of the ureter, each calyx receiving 2 or 3 papilla. These two parts, cortical and medullary, so dissimilar in appearance, are very similar in structure, being made up of urinary tubes and blood vessels, united and bound together by a connecting matrix or stroma. Now let's get into the minute anatomy, microscopical. The tubuli urinary, of which the kidney is for the most part made up, commence in the cortical portion of the kidney, and after pursuing a very circuitous course through the cortical and medullary parts of the kidney, finally terminate at the apices of the malphizian pyramids by open mouths, so that the fluid that they contain is emptied into the dilated extremity of the ureter contained in the sinus of the kidney. If the surface of one of the papillae is examined with a lens, it will be seen to be studded over with a number of small depressions, from 16 to 20 in number. In a fresh kidney, upon pressure being made, fluid is seen to exude from these depressions. They are the orifices of the tubular urinary, which terminate in this situation. They commence in the cortical portion of the kidney as the malphizian bodies, which are small round masses. I think what they're talking about here is also known as the glomerulus, but I could be wrong. I just need to, actually, this is the glomerulus. No, I think the glomerulus is just that sac of vessels, and surrounding it is a Bowman's capsule, but let's just read on. This is renal corpuscle. Renal corpuscle. Yeah, that's the one. Renal corpuscle. I think nephrology is one of the hardest things to learn as a med student, but the straight or collecting tubule. I think this lacks a lot of images, and I'm an image girly. But I think we can see here that convoluted means like really twisted and complex, and we can see the tubule. So we have here the descending limb, the loop and the ascending limb, and then they all drain into the collecting duct. Okay, so each straight, otherwise called a collecting or receiving tube, commences by a small orifice in the summit of one of the papillae, thus opening and discharging its contents into the inferior one of the calyces. Traced into the substance of the pyramid, the tubes are found to run from the apex to base, dividing dichotomously into their cores and slightly diverging from each other. Thus, dividing and subdividing, they reach the base of the pyramid and enter the cortical structure greatly increased in number. Upon entering the cortical portion, they continue as a straight course for a variable distance and are arranged into groups called the medullary rays. Several of these groups correspond to a single pyramid. The tubes in the center of the group are the longest and each reach to the surface of the kidney, while the external ones are shorter and advance only a short distance into the cortex. In consequence of this arrangement, the cortical portion presents a number of conical masses, the apices of which the periphery of the organ and bases are applied to the medullary portion. These are termed the pyramids of Feri. As they run through the cortical portion, the straight tubes receive on either side of the curved extremity of the convoluted tubules, which, as stated above, commence as the Malphagian bodies. It will be seen from the above description that there are a continuous series of tubes from their commencement in the Malphagian bodies to their termination at the orifice on the apices of the pyramids of Malphagian. I have no idea how to pronounce that. To their termination. Okay. And that the urine, the secretion of which commences in the capsule, finds its way through the tubules into the calyces of the kidney, and so too to the ureter. Commencing at the capsule, the tube first presents a narrow constricted portion. 1. The neck. 2. It forms a wide convoluted tubule, the proximal convoluted tubule. It becomes spiral, the spiral tubule of Shawa. It enters the medullary structure as a narrow straight tube, the descending limb of Henle's loop, forming a loop and becoming dilated. It ascends somewhat spirally and gradually diminishing in the calibri. Again enters the cortical structure, the ascending loop of Henle's loop. It now becomes irregular and angular in outline, the irregular tubule. It then becomes convoluted, the distal convoluted tubule. 8. Diminishing in size, it forms a curve, the curved tubule. 9. Finally, it joins a straight tubule, the straight collecting duct. Oh, there we go. We've got some images, which is it continues downwards through the medullary substance to open at the apex of the pyramid. The tubuli uriniferi, their structure. The tubuli uriniferi consists of the basement lined in the membrane, lined with the epithelium. The epithelium varies considerably in different sections of the uniferous tubule. In the neck, the epithelium is continuous with that lining the Malphagian capsule, and like it consists of flattened cells with an oval nucleus. These cells, however, are very indistinct cells with an oval nucleus. So here we can see that the longitudinal section of the descending limb versus the straight tubule. We can see that we've got kind of some squamous cells. And here we've got more cuboidal epithelium here. Alright. In the proximal convoluted tubule and the spiral tube of the Shashawa, the epithelium is polyhedral in shape, the sides of the cells not being straight but fitting into each other, and in some animals so fused together that it's impossible to make out the lines of the junctions. In the basement membrane in the human kidney, the cells are often presenting in angular projection of the surface of the next basement membrane. These cells are made up of two or more less-like front fibers, which rest by one extremity on the basement membrane, while the other projects towards the lumen of the tubule. This gives the cells an appearance of distinct striation. In the descending limb of Henle's loop, the epithelium resembles that found in the Malpighian capsule and the commencement of the tubule, consisting of flat, transparent epithelial plates with an oval nucleus. In the ascending limb, on the other hand, the cells partake more the characters of those described in the existing proximal convoluted tubule, being polyhedral in shape and presenting the same appearance of striation. The nucleus, however, is not situated at the center of the cell, but near the lumen. After the ascending limb of Henle's loop becomes narrower upon entering the cortical structure, the striation seems to be confined to the outer part of the cell. At all events, it is much more distinct in this situation. The nucleus, which appears flattened and angular, being still situated near the lumen. In a regular tubule, the cells undergo a still further change, becoming very angular and presenting thick, bright rods or markings, which render this striation much more distinct than any other section of the urinary tubules. In the distal convoluted tubule, the epithelium appears to be somewhat similar to that which has been described as existing in the proximal convoluted tubule, but presents a peculiar refractive appearance. In the curved tubule, just before its entrance into the straight collecting tube, the epithelium varies greatly as regards the shape of the cells, some being angular with short processes, others spindle-shaped, others polyhedral. In the straight tubes, the epithelium is more or less columnar in its papillary portion. The cells are distinctly columnar and transparent, but as the tube approaches the cortex, the cells are less uniform in shape. Some are polyhedral and others are angular with short processes. Okay, alright, let's just take a look at this diagram here. Let's take a look. The writing is so tiny. When they said minute, it says here